first episode of the NSMQ live chat in 2022. My name is Anthony Benjamin Adiaba, and I work with Primetime Limited, the producers of the National Science and Math Quiz. We're currently live on our Facebook page with Mr. Edem Dzakpasu, a member of the 1996 team from Presec Legon, who were crowned the Southern Sector champions, but unfortunately were missed out on the national championship to Prempeh College in 96. Edem, good evening and welcome to the show. How are you doing?
We lost your audio feed.
Hello, Edem. Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you, yes.
Great.
I lost
Okay, I was saying I was introducing you. So
okay.
I don't know if anyone else heard that, but I was saying that you are a legend. And today we are going to get to know the man behind the legend. And so I'm just going to start by asking you, who is Edem? Who is the man Edem? Why are you such a notable figure in the history of NSMQ?
Well, thank you so very much for that kind introduction, Anthony. Yes, the man Edem. So I grew up in Kumasi, and my parents both teachers. My dad, a university professor. My mom, a junior high school teacher. So growing up, I was introduced to the art of studying, reading, and the like. I went to Amankweti Early Primary School. That's where it all started, which is the Saito system. So I did the morning shift and the afternoon shift. After Amankweti, I went to University JSS. And after JSS, I applied to and got into Presec, where I met some of the sharpest minds in the world. And once I got into Presec, obviously the Science and Math Quiz was very popular because they had held 2 editions. One before I went in, the 93 edition, then moved into 94. And then 95 before our time in 96. So I studied science. The good thing about Presec was that they elected to have science students study both math and biology. So we went into Presec where we studied both math and biology, unlike other schools that made students choose from the get-go which track they wanted. So that gave us an edge because we're able to master both subjects before we decided to choose which track we wanted in the final year. So during that time at Presec, I was privileged to be called upon among 6 others that formed the core team of the Science and Math Quiz in 96. And we're 3 on stage, myself, Papa Kofi Anor, and Dr. Alex Jan. And then the other colleagues, Dr. Chris Adai, Dr. Niboy Hammond, and Parkway Sinunu. We represented Presec in the 96th edition. I think perhaps what made our time most exciting was because we had some pretty solid contests, some that we delved into, especially the semifinal stage when we met Kwabuche and Fansipem was always tough. In fact, the prior year in 95, we beat them by just a single point. And so we knew they were tough opponents to beat. So we'll get to the quiz. And then after Presec, having studied science, I proceeded to KNUST, University of Science and Technology, where I did electrical engineering. Back then, my options, usually when you study science, you might think medicine track or engineering. I know my dad in particular would love the idea of medicine. When I got the side of engineering, it was also great. And I also thought I was more mathematically inclined, and I didn't want to be involved in the reading associated with biology. And so I wanted to go the math route, and engineering was the logical option at the time for me. So I did electrical engineering and tech, and then I went to Texas A&M for my master's in electrical engineering, and then was a semiconductor engineer with applied materials for about 4 years. So essentially, applied materials, what they do is they make equipment used to make computer chips. And so I was more on the manufacturing side, designing and building, assembling, integrating, and testing these devices and selling to customers. So it's a great experience for me to put into play what I had learned in school. And also, some of the mentors I met and some of the colleagues that I worked with that helped me gain more knowledge. And then after that, I decided to go to business school so I could learn the business side of things. having learned the technical side. So then I proceeded to the University of Chicago, and there's a story behind why Chicago. We'll get to that at some point. And then had my MBA, and during that time, I had a stint with Credit Suisse in the investment banking group, doing tech banking up in San Francisco. And after I went back to school, I joined my current company, Chevron Corporation, in the MBA leadership program. And I've been with the company since I graduated from school. I've had wonderful experiences in commercial and business development roles throughout the entire value chain. So the upstream side of the business, the midstream side, and the downstream side of the business. And currently, I do investments in startups, which is great. So I'm leveraging the technology and the science background that I had from Presec still today. So I look at, as part of a team, we look at technologies that enable the energy transition. So think about things like, hydrogen, things like carbon capture, mobility platforms, mobility infrastructure, waste to product, carbon to product, recycling. So it's actually fun and exciting talking to seasoned entrepreneurs that have set up amazing businesses and trying to learn what it is that they did to get to where they are as they try to scale their business. So if you're asking about Edem Dzakpasu, there's a boy who went to a Mankweti primary school, the Saito system, went to university, JSS, got to Presec, went to tech, went to Booth, and then worked at, Applied Materials, and now with Chevron. So that's my career trajectory thus far.
That's what we call a seasoned life. There's a lot of different flavors and a lot of different experiences that make it very rich. I like that you highlighted all your teammates from the Presec team, and I think you mentioned that you're still very involved in the Odadie fraternity. So I'm just going to start by asking the questions that everyone is here to hear the answers to. Your time at Presec, the good old days. Let's just start with the generic one. What's your fondest memory from Presec?
Oh man, there are lots of fondest memories. I guess one would be, when we all got into Presec, Presec was well known as very storied science institution because of the science college that we had at the time. And so anybody coming to Presec knew they were going to meet with the best and the brightest. So there were folks that came from some schools. I mean, I told you I started off in a Mankweti primary school, right? So some came from Northridge Lyceum. Quite frankly, I never heard about a Lyceum before. I didn't even know Lyceum was a school. Some came from Morning Stars, they came from Northridge, all these top schools in Accra. And we got in the same class. And some of them were quite vocal. Some I had seen on television playing piano. My twin friends, shout out to them, Julius and Augustus. And so we got in and you have this sense of fright, okay? Because one, you think, well, am I good enough? Can I make it happen? Can I succeed here? But I always remember something that my dad told me, and that is, I think it was the fourth Earl of Chesterford in a letter to his son, who said, anything worth doing at all is worth doing well. So my goal then, my game plan was just get myself in the zone, do what I have to do, and the results will reflect that. So I went in with a game plan. And again, you come with a game plan, but as Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan so you get punched in the face. So you could be punched in the face, right? So my game plan was hit the books, make the best out of it, and the results will reflect. So there was a time when, as we started, some of the colleagues were like, as for me, my house, mathematics flows like water. So math is easy for me, right? So that is a sense of intimidation. You hear that from somebody saying that. And guess what? The first term exam comes through, the person tops the class. Now, I missed out by half a point, but who am I to show that I also was a good student, right? So he confirmed what indeed he had said about himself, right? And then his brother also topped the whole class. Wow. So clearly the competition was really keen. But then over time, as things got settled, we came with our sacrum vim, right? Having come from Kumasi, we also had some vim behind us. So we also decided to put in the work and make sure we could make things happen. So over time, we started scoring the max, and then it started trickling, and then people started hearing. And then before I realized, it became some of the critical mass, knowing, okay, there are some folks that you have to consider as godfathers. And if you belong to that clique, then it means you've actually showed your face, you belong in Presec. But just to make a point clear here, at Presec, you could find a class of like 156 science students. I would say everybody, all the 156 guys were pretty strong.
Wow.
So if you're on top of the 156, they know you are the cream of the crop. And so my fondest memory was that keen competition that occurred at Presec, but it was also very collaborative. It wasn't like somebody would hold on information just because they want to be the only person that would know everything. No, they will share. And it's even best when they share with you and then they beat you afterwards, right? Because they're like, yes, we gave you the information, but we still beat you to it. So it was great. We learned from each other. As I said, folks came from different high schools, very, very solid, and came with strong backgrounds. And then having all that centered in one particular place was great for us. And also the seniors, right? We had mentors. So we had folks that were in the old system. We came in through the SS, and there were folks that were in the O-level, A-level. We met the last batch. They were actually our classmates that ran away from the JSS system so they could catch up with the last set of the A-level, O-level system, right? So we had those also that we could lean on because they had been at Presec for 5 years. They had a lot of experience, so they could tell us which subjects that we should pay particular attention to, which ones we should, not be so worried about, and how we could, prioritize our time between prep, studying, and and then other extracurricular activities. So my fondest memory is just an agglomeration of all these events. So it's difficult to single out one, but the competitive nature of the boys. This is an all boys school, and everybody came with his A game, so they had to be also on track to be on board with the team.
It sounds like your time at Presec was very fun for you because all these different scenarios you recounted sound like very boys. I see why you're still very in touch with your Presec identity, and you're even wearing your Presec shirts
today.
Yes,
I have it right here.
But before I move on from the general Presec stuff, I wanted to hear more about your extracurricular stuff. Apart from being an umbrella boy and being like a math shark, what exactly were some of the other things you did for fun while you were at Presec?
Yeah, so at Presec, we had a choir. So we had a professional choir already, right? And then there was the secret one that I can't delve into too much details, right? And that choir leader was there too. I can mention a nickname, nobody will know whom I'm talking about. And we sang songs that you would say were not sanctioned by the administration. Some that will get you in trouble. These are some Jama songs that you don't want to sing. And so I was a member, but I was a silent member of the choir. So if you mentioned, if you wanted to find out who was a member, you wouldn't find me. But the core members knew I was a member of the choir. So that's one. We used to also, sports, we didn't have enough sporting events at Presec. There was only football. I didn't partake in those. From an extracurricular perspective, though, I was part of the original House 4 choir that won the singing competition. So that one is the official one. And then also, I would say just those days, it was more about reading, boys going to Intako, having the Jama sessions. I never made a trip to Abu Ghis. I missed out on that. So I didn't see the Big Paso High, our girls up on the mountains. I missed out on that because I was so much in Presec. But in Intako, I never missed. I was always there, part of the Jama team. We called ourselves the senior citizens. We didn't take on any official positions on campus, but we were more involved in Presec activities. And we still keep doing that.
I like that. I really like that. So I guess I'm going to ask about NSMQ 1996, the journey from the very first contest to that final with Prempeh College. What do you remember from those days, and what do you think our audience wants to hear about that?
Yeah, that was the third edition of the contest, and Prempeh had won in '94, Presec had won in '95, and then we had the sector system, so the southern sector, northern sector, and then you had the grand finale. So coming in, obviously, we're considered favorites, given we had won in '95.
Yeah.
So shout out to Mensa Abe and Philip Sapon and Christine Kanza was in my house. Those are the contestants '95. And then so when we came into '96, it was held on campus. So, it was that then all the masters were present, both science and non-science. So all our teachers were present, right? So we had to put up a show. The first event we had was against Bishop Hammond. Okay. And we were able to dispatch them quite quickly. In fact, we thought we were going to have some resistance, but we were lucky. We were able to finish them off with about 30-point gap or so. And so we moved to the second one, which was with Akraka. So on the Akraka team, there were some members that became my classmates. So Ajay was a classmate of one of the members on our team. Okay. And when he came to the contest and spoke with him and asked whether he was competing, he said, "Oh no, I'm not on stage, I'm on the bench." I think he got frightened. If my buddy from school is on the bench, then who are the folks I'm going to meet on stage? And so I think that fright came in. So during that contest, it was tough at the time. Our strategy was always to use a power doctrine, overwhelming force. Just between the first two rounds, just make sure you gap the opponent by more than 10. So that when you get to the third round, which is more of the problem of the day, with 10 points, if you fizzle out on that one, then you can offset it with a gap you maintain, right? So you want an unassailable lead the first two rounds. And that was our strategy. And again, it was our plan until we got punched in the face at the time. We'll get to that. So with Akraka, we were able to dispatch them. Then came the semifinal match against Kwabuchi. Yeah. And I think for those that watched the event in '95, Kwabuchi gave us a tough contest. In fact, at the very last round, before we answered our last true or false question, it was, I think, 58 in front of him and 57 Presec. And if we got a true or false right, it would be 59, 58. If we got it wrong, would have gotten my mark deducted. So that would be 58, 56 in favor of Kwabuchi. And somehow we prevailed. And so we knew that it was going to be a very tough game. So going into it, we knew very well that it would be tough. And oh boy, it was. That, I think, it's the most significant contest, if you ask me, of all the contests we've had, which one was the toughest? And there were a myriad of reasons. For that particular contest, one, there weren't many situations of Professor Ramadi, may she rest in peace, given discretionary points, because you either won the full points or you lost it. And so there was no room for, I'll give you 1 out of 3, 2 out of 3 for you to make a case of, okay, maybe her discretion did not favor me here or there. And 2, you had those 3 guys at the time, Alan Stildazi, Ruben Ngeza, and Hubert Isio, who became my classmate at engineering school at Tech. Strong guys. At the end of the third round, we were tied. Wow. At the end of the fourth round, we were tied. Hey. At the end of the fifth round, we were tied. So, in fact, during the riddles, we split 2-2 equally. We answered 2 correct. They answered 2 correct. And in fact, the last riddle, I had no clue. We could tell Presec did not even press the bell. But Hubert was the one that pressed. I think it was something related to logic or so. And it was tough. And so we had to decide that by sudden death, where you throw the last riddle to make a case and determine who would win. For contests where you have a 2-man team, usually when it's very keenly contested, you're thinking about a 9-point gap as a single-digit differential, right? And so if somebody wins by, say, less than 5, which is the midpoint, then it could have gone the other way. And if the person wins by more than 5, it's 6.5, this is a convincing win. So in our case, clearly it could have gone either way because we were tied from beginning to the end. I remember that the chairman of Prime Time came on stage to just cool us down a bit because the tension was just way too much.
Very tense.
These young teenagers might collapse because of the weight of the enormity of the pressure, right?
Yeah.
Because on stage, you're talking to the quiz mistress, but behind your backs, you're talking to the nation because it'll be televised, and so when that sinks in, it gives you some fright. And there were some questions during that time that were pretty tough. I recall one that Professor Ramadi asked about definition of lattice enthalpy. And there were 2 ways you could answer that. Either you have a bond formation process or a bond dissociation. One is exothermic, one is endothermic. So I went with the one where you form bonds. So I think the definition of it's the enthalpy change that accompanies the production of 1 mole of an ionic crystal from a constituent ions in the gaseous state. So Professor paused the event and asked one of the consultants, Asumani, and then he nodded. And what I heard was Akwanetra. So they said, okay, cut, repeat. And so I asked the same question and then I'm expected to answer again. But I bring this here because one of my colleagues had his buddy at the back. They had already won the semifinal version, the first set.
We were waiting for you guys.
Yes, this is Niai from Augusto. So he was telling Julius that, oh, you know what, this your party will not be able to match. He will freeze. And this was after the fact that Julius giving me the information. And so when I was asked to define again, I gave the exact same definition, which was the enthalpy change that accompanies the production of 1 mole of an ionic crystal from a constituent ions in the gaseous state. And Julius said, the guy said, this your friend is an animal. There's no way this guy's human. So I think that frightened them a bit when we got to the final, when we met them. And so with Boche, the last riddle was about the mesenteric artery, and Papano was our savior at that time when he gave that answer, which, gave us a day. And then we met with St. Augustine's. But before we met with them, Primetime Boss invited us home for a party just to cool us down, let us interact. So we had a good interaction, and then we went on stage for the final. And the final we thought was going to be tough, but it turned out to be quite easier than we thought it would be. So we dispatched Augusto with a 20-point gap, 89-69. Okay, that was exciting. 89-69. So that was how the whole quiz played out during those sections. But during the Kwaboche event in the semifinal, there were some pretty tough questions. Questions about polarizing power of an anion, polarizability of a cation, and there were instances where Professor Iramadi herself will stop and clap because she felt those were questions that she wasn't expecting us to answer. But some way, somehow, we came up with answers to those questions. And we had good, great tutors. Mr. Pepra, who was legendary in chemistry. He was the person that oversaw everything. And there were 2 students, or former students, Frank Amenya and Rafael Afaido, who were the folks that were coordinating all the trials and all the questions and all the stuff we had to do in the prep before we went to these events. And we're still in touch, quite frankly, after more than a quarter of a century, to 26 years, but we're still in touch.
Impressive. Very, very impressive.
Thank you.
So all I'm hearing is that, wow, those were the days where the NSMQ was very do or die. There was a lot of, it's still like that today, but it's just hearing about the closeness of that semifinal contest with Kwabuchi. Just, I don't know what I would have done with myself. But at this point, I'd like to remind everyone that this is the NSMQ live chat with Edem Dzakpasu from the 1996 Presec Legon team. that won the Southern Sector Championship, but missed out on the national championship to Prempeh College. I'm going to just read a few of the Facebook comments and questions, and then we can continue with the questions I had for you. So
sure.
The first few ones are just Nanaya Okufuamwa says, this is Razgigi, your daddy, who was in Sakomono with you. So if you recognize him,
yes.
You know that you. Eric Ufosuenchi also said, Charlie Edem, long time, you're looking great.
Thank you.
Victor Asalu said, the legendary Edem Dzakpasu who solved a redox reaction question, and the late Professor Ramadi came. That's for this one, can't solve within the short time.
Oh, so, that redox question.
Yeah, it left a mark in a lot of people's minds. So from what you said, you deserve the legendary status that you have. Senior Wahid, Mr. Kotoko says, Asoka Edem.
Yes.
Jeremy Aqua, who is an NSMQ trainer, says he's taking notes of the strategies you listed. So I'm glad it's helping someone prepare for this year's edition. A lot of comments just coming in. Everyone wants you to know that they are watching live. So let's go back to now that we've heard about your time on the quiz, we've heard about we've heard about your life in general, but we want to ask about how it felt when you won the Southern Sector quiz. Like, that was actually the first time that a school won the NSMQ back-to-back, but because of how the national championship was structured, a lot of people don't know that. So how did you feel to make that history? How did you celebrate with your team, with your school? What happened?
Great, that's a great, thanks. That's a great question. Yes, it felt great. Again, coming into the 96 contest, having won in 95, we came in as favorites. And so the expectation was that we would do well. But again, you never know until you get on stage and you get knocked out by someone that you never expected will knock you out. So it was great, especially so several facets. The first I would say was the impact. You know, when you watch these quiz events, you don't know how much impact you're having on people. In fact, back in the day, folks would watch the quiz, look at the performance of the schools, and then determine which schools they want to apply to, right? So they look at how Presec may have done, or Prempeh, or WAS, or Kabuche, or St. Augustine's in a particular year. And then they'll decide, you know what, I'm going to Presec because the Presec guys put up a show that really made me feel great. And so I feel big about going to Presec. So that impact is great. Of course, there comes the reward and the recognition that you've won, a quiz event, which is broadcast live. It was the first time I had been on television. I had never been, so it was great to be on TV. So my area boys from my Kwetia camp through University Primary, they're all giving me shout outs, sending me letters saying, you've done a great job. I met some of my colleagues too on the Prempeh side in the finals. I'm sure we'll get to that when we talk about the finals. The school gave us a nice reward. We were recognized. We had certificates. We had some cash monetary gifts. Then it was sponsored by Unilever's Brilliant Soap, and that's why we used to be called the Brilliant Science and Maths Quiz because of that soap. So we got lots of those Brilliant Soap also. And then, classmates giving you a high five. Hey, you've done a great job. Giving all the support coming in because it was on campus, right? So basically, there was really no reason. And then the masters, they'll come to class, and then after they finish teaching, and then they'll comment on some of the things they saw. And then, so it was fun seeing that you were part of a team that brought joy to campus, continue the tradition of Presec, right? So on that count, I would say it was exciting, it was great, but more importantly, I think it was an impact that we had unknowingly. And so even today, I still get random messages from people telling me how I inspired them or how the team inspired them to pursue science because they saw us on television, or they might email my cousin who goes with the same name, thinking they're emailing me, telling me,
Okay.
I saw you on stage and you inspired me, and so it's great when you get that kind of feedback, because I think you measure success by how much impact you've had. And so, especially the ones that you don't even know about. So it was great seeing that it helped others encouraged to study science.
So, I mean, I don't want to drop any hints, but
yeah,
we're going to talk about the Champion of Champions contest.
Yes.
And what happened that day? What happened that day?
Good. So, there was a 6-month lag. We had the Southern Sector final in April of '96, and then the Champions of Champions, because they had to finish the Northern Sector also. And I think it was in October of '96. Went with the same game plan, overwhelming force. So go in, gap the opponent, and create an unassailable lead the first 2 rounds, and then make up for any drawbacks in the 3rd round. Because problem of the day, you can always never tell how it will play out. You can get 0. I'm sure they will give you 1 for making an attempt, but it's a whole 10-point game, right? So we went with the same game plan. First round was on point. I think we gapped about 5 points. But second round, which didn't play out so well, and so the game plan, that's when I said we got punched. So the game plan did not work out the way we thought it would. And then also there were instances of partial questions, partial answers. That's what I classify as a discretionary answers, where because they are not absolutes, professor has to decide, I'll give you 2 out of 3, 1 out of 3. Not to make any excuses, but there was a reason I brought that in the Kwabuchi time, that it was a game where there was no room for those kind of discretionary answers or discretionary points from the quiz mistress. So if you knew you want a point, you dropped. So there were instances, one clear case where I think the definition of HIV, which was then human immunodeficiency virus, but then the deficiency did not come in, it was missing. But the other school got it all the same. And then there was an instance where we were given a question, we got a 1 point out of 3. So those things came into play. But obviously, Prempeh was a formidable opponent. Without a doubt, they deserved the victory. So I'm not trying to discount or trying to downplay the kind of force and vim they brought to the event. It was actually great to see one of my classmates, Yao Dubuachi, on the other side. Dr. Dubuachi and I went to University JSS together. And so it was great to see him on stage. And then Saki, who was on the other side, who was also part of the team, became a classmate of mine at Tech. And then Kofi Otimboateng, who was part of the team at the time, we met about 16 years after in New Zealand at a common friend's wedding. So we had a small reunion where we talked about what happened, how the quiz was exciting. So then back to the quiz itself, the structure. So went to problem of the day, and I think we just had a 1 point difference, so it wasn't that bad. But then there were some places where we may have faltered, and there may have been some of the calculations. I was a risk taker on the team because I had an affinity for being fast. So I would take the first stab, go fast, and then the Godfathers, Papa Ano and Lexus will let me go and then drop, and then they'll come in and then they will correct the errors that I dropped. So at the time, that is when the redox equation thing came into play. So I know a lot of folks wanted to know how we're able to balance the redox equation in less than 5 seconds out of the 30 seconds allotted. But I'm not going to disclose all the details because I'll be giving out our secret sauce in the competition.
Yeah.
But at Presec, we believe in sharing. So I'll share how we arrived at that. So basically, a redox equation, you're dealing with oxidation and reduction. So you add electrons here, you take electrons out. And you can balance in 2 ways, usually whether an acidic medium or a basic medium. Acidic medium is easier because all you have to do is to find your H plus and then balance with your H2O on the other side. So they're what we call the half equation method. So you start out with the atoms, you balance with the H plus, you add your water, and you do the electrons, and you get out of the way. But there are some usual suspects. There are some transition metal oxides, like an MnO4 minus, Cr2O7. You need to know how to disintegrate that from the get-go. So if you know how to split those, then you know that if you have to add anything, any other metal to balance the equation, then you know all you have to do is to just figure out how many atoms you have to add here and how many you have to add on the other side. So you go in knowing the usual suspects, how to break them down, because you don't have time to start thinking about that on set, on stage. So you break that in your head, and then once you hear the question, then you know what it is already, you framed it, and then you deliver the answer. When it comes to basic medium, there's a bit of a trick because you're not dealing with H+, you're dealing with OH. But that trick I'm not going to disclose to my opponents. It's only for a reason of Presec guys and our Bugis ladies. So we'll get to that when we get to that stage. But at least I've divulged how we're able to balance those equations and how it seemed like it was so effortless and that impressed Professor Ramadi. So that's how come we're able to balance those equations. I know it's been more than a quarter of a century, but you know, it's something that you're passionate about. And you know, again, going back to anything we're doing at all is we're doing well. Those old habits typically die hard. So you always hold on to them. And that's why I can remember that vividly without even looking at the tapes. And so we had, and then we got to the riddle section, you know, where we missed out some and we got some, then a true or false, you can never tell, right? True or false, you lose one, you drop a point. So if you drop a point, that's typically a -3 because the 2 you'd have earned and then the 1 that you lost. So that's the -3 right there, right? So if you have partial answers, those discretionary answers coming into play, that can make a difference. So you want to avoid that. But our game plan of overwhelming force did not play out the first 2 rounds like it had in the other rounds. So it was more like the same repeat of Kwabuche, except this time around we went tied throughout. It changed the change, you know, the leadership changed rounds during the contest. We led round 1 and then it came through, and then we came close at some point, and so we dropped off. But Prempeh was a great competitor, and he won fair and square. It was great to see, you know, Yao Duwachi on that side together with Saki and also, you know, Kofi Otimboatin. So it was a great contest. We enjoyed it. We know that ordinarily we would have wanted to retain that as well, but it's you can't win all the time. So we understand that. And I think anybody that watched the event realized it was a closely matched contest. Like I put out in the outset, if you have less than a 5-point gap, it could have gone either way. If they had won by more than 6, that would have been more convincing, right? So it was a close contest. It wasn't our day. It was Prempeh's day. And so they won fair and square.
I like the sportsmanship from you and the fact that you can't win all the time. But I mean, Presec still has the most NSMQ trophies in their cabinet, so that counts for something. So we are still on the NSMQ live chat with Edem Dzakpasu. I was going to read some of the comments. There's actually a question here. Jeremy Alpha wants to know what exactly kept you motivated way back during your schooling at Presec. I think you already talked about the inspiration you got from your dad and how the school was just set up to encourage competition and collaboration. So if there's something else, you can add that to it. There are lots of people in the comments calling you. Forgive me if I say this wrongly, but should I say Papiti or?
Yeah, that's my nickname. Yes, that's true. That's my nickname.
How do you pronounce it?
What's that?
How do you pronounce it?
Papiti. Yeah, that's
it.
Papiti,
I was right.
That's my nickname. So they know
what's the story behind that?
That's a long story. I don't think we can.
You don't have time for that.
But it has roots in my Oseko days. You know, so you have to talk in chambers.
Okay. No problem. I will definitely ask about that. There are lots of people who are inspired. Musin Saeed, Frederick Otuteria. Everyone is just giving you fans in the comments. So I guess now we've already done about 45 minutes, so we can talk about your university days and like maybe your current life. So KNUST, how was that? You met some of your competition or your competitors in school and you were classmates. What was the vibe on campus at the time? How were your university days like?
It was great. Before KNUST, because the academic calendar had changed, because of the disruption we had with university disruptions, and we stayed home for about 2 years, right, before we went to university. So during that gap before university, we just had to keep ourselves busy. So some of us took the A-level exam because then our seniors used to tell us, you talk about you've done SSC, taste the red paper, which is how the A-level questions were framed, the red paper. So we took those exams. Some of us also, apart from that, before university, I spent that time reading a lot of books. And so I read mostly novels and random books I can get from my dad's library. I recall one of the books was Years of Upheaval by Dr. Henry Kissinger. Now, my tech days, it was fun. The electrical engineering class was more like half the Presec class. And so it was more like Presec all over again. Most of my classmates I had at Presec were all back at tech. So it was great. And then also we met some of, as Riley pointed out, Saki from Prempeh, Hubert from Kwaboche. We're all in the same electrical engineering class. So it was fun. During university days, I didn't think we were much interested in competition like we did back in SSS, but we just reminisce those stories and have fun about those. But it was a fun environment, learning new things, establishing new friendships and relationships, especially from folks from other schools that we had never met. So it was good, great environment for us. And actually at that time too, my mom was also a student on campus. So it was great. I ran into my mom. She was doing her bachelor's in the social science department. And people would ask me, why is your mom going to school at this stage? And I'll tell them, why not ask her? But what she told me was that, she had to jettison a university education to give it to all the 7 of us. And now that we are all adults, she's now going to have us. So it was great having my mom on campus. Anytime I saw her, obviously, the first thing I asked was for money. So my pockets were deep and I'll go for food. And then I got involved in some extracurricular work. I tried to run for hall president of Republic Hall, which I was not successful in that pursuit. So I was judicial committee secretary. I sat on the board. I sat on the judicial committee of Republic Hall and then the constitutional review committee. So I tried to do something extracurricular outside of the usual science and math or engineering stuff. And I also wrote some articles that I posted on a notice board. One was a tribute to Robert Ludlum, because I used to love his novels, especially the Matri's Circle, Matri's Countdown, the Bond series, Identity, Supremacy, Ultimatum, Matlock Papers, etc., Road to Gandolfo, Road to Omaha. So I wrote a piece, tribute about Robert Ludlum. I also wrote a piece about combating terrorism. This was in the wake of 9/11. So I decided to put myself to some journalistic pursuit, if you will, just to get myself at least out of the engineering realm and publish some things and test how well I could do with journalism. So I tried to put in some things into writing, and I like to write. So I would read about material, and then I'll write, and then I'll share with my team, my colleagues, and get feedback. So university days, great. Hall week was the hallmark of university days, so a lot of events.
Which hall you in?
I was at Report. So Republic Hall was the Akoko Report. So it was a cool, calm hall. It wasn't the Katanga boys. And it wasn't the Pechepe Queens guys. We were the seat of government. The SRC office at Republic Hall. So we were more like the go-to place. We weren't like Indies or Unity, and we're just rapport. So it was fun. It was also the time that we interacted with some of the classmates we had from the girls' schools, because we went to all boys schools, and apparently there was a class at I think it was Holyco that particular year. Somehow they did not participate in the quiz event. I don't know how they weren't invited, but they had a strong squad in waiting that had they perhaps participated, maybe would have been got into the final. So it was great to get to interact with all the various classes, all the classmates that we hadn't met at Presec. But again, as I said, electrical engineering class was more like Presec all over again, because close to half of the class were all Presecers.
Yeah. I'm just hearing about the books you read and like the fact that you wrote. The man behind the legend just keeps surprising me. You are a man of many talents. So because this is not supposed to take too long, I'm going to just go straight to your MBA days.
Yeah.
The fact that as a scientist, as a science-oriented person, you have an MBA. Can you talk us through the process, how you from working as a technical person to becoming a more business-oriented, leadership-minded person?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as I indicated, I was in engineering and did that for 4 years, and then decided to go to business school. The intent was to get to understand the business side of things. I had actually worked on the project where the company I worked for had acquired another company, and during the integration of the new acquisition, we worked with some teams that came in to talk to us about how we can standardize manufacturing across board. And some of the interactions that we had folks that were talking about terms like value, new frontiers, markets. And so I was wondering if perhaps there was something I was missing on the engineering side. And so having had that experience, I felt perhaps it was a good time to explore the business side of things so I can complement that with my engineering training. So that's what informed my foray into business. And so when it comes to the actual leapfrogging from semiconductor engineer to a business school person and dabbling in other things, business development, etc., it was mostly a function of, okay, how do I looked at the technical route. So I saw that the technical route had some limits too from career trajectory standpoint. But I thought, and I also realized that most of the senior folks that I saw that I looked up to had a fusion of both business and technical, because it helped. And when I asked them in conversations, what they said was that it helped shape their thinking and did not let them sound myopic, because engineers can be boxed. I'm an engineer. I'm an engineer any day, every day. But you can be boxed in your thinking process, thinking that all that I have done analytically is what should be the prevailing condition. But a business person comes with a different mindset, because he's thinking beyond what you've done narrowly. What is the big picture? How does this help me expand the scope of the business I'm in? How does it help me move into new frontiers? How does it help me expand my footprint? How does it help me deliver value? So these are some of the things the business guy brings in. And so if you have the technical background, you can complement for the business, then you have both worlds in your hands. So when your myopic engineering mindset comes into play, your business will put you in check. And if your business mindset, thinking about value comes into play, your engineering mindset will fact check you that, hey, listen, you can't do it this way because there are some constraints. So for me, it was more about how well I could mesh the two and how well it could help me move to the next step. And that's why I made that switch onto a business. And then asking about Chicago, I mentioned that I'll get to that story. I was once a security guard at an investment bank in London. And when, as part of my garden, I took an interest in a substantive way that occurred at the bank. And I realized they were into risk management and financing. And I looked at the profiles of senior management and realized, three of them, the COO, the CEO of Americas, and the global head of investment banking, were products of the University of Chicago. And so at the time, I didn't know much about it. And so I called my dad, who, of course, in academia will know all these schools. And I told him that, I know about the Oxfords, the Cambridges, the Harvards, Stanfords, but never heard about University of Chicago. They had a big laugh and say, for those of us in academia, when we meet folks from Chicago, we shake them with both hands. We shake their hands with both hands because they have their own school of thought in any academic discipline. And so if you haven't heard about them, it's because they don't market themselves. But if you're in academia, you know who they are. And so if you're thinking about them at some point in the future, you're not making a bad decision. And so that's how Chicago came into play. And thankfully, I got accepted in, and it broadened my scope. I met a lot of great classmates. In fact, I had some Presec classmates at Chicago also. Some that were my seniors.
Everywhere.
It's my classmates in business school. Sam was my junior at Presec, was also at Chicago. So we still established a Presec tradition. Even after leaving Presec, we made sure we still created that pipeline. And so it was great for me getting the exposure to Nobel Prize laureates, central bank governors. Randy Krosner taught money and banking. He invited Hank Paulson, who used to be Treasury Secretary, to come talk to us in class. I mean, these experiences you wouldn't get ordinarily from going to, other places. So it was a great experience for me, getting exposed to, world-class faculty, world-class education, and then the classmates. I mean, some had run billion-dollar budgets. Some had, competed in wars. So they had interesting backgrounds. So that is how I made that transition to business school, and then get into where I am today. But then again, the core of me is still my engineer, because it's not missing, it's not lost. I'm still an engineer at first. So the business side is just complementing the technical aspects, just to put me in check anytime I try to go myopic. There have been several instances where folks have not done the way I've done it, have done extremely well, meaning they've either been engineers throughout and have gone all the way to the pinnacle of their careers. Others have been business all the way through. But for me, this combination helped me manage both worlds well. And that's why I made that switch, if you will. But see, I've still not lost from technology, because I have been exposed to tech ever since I left, right? What I'm doing now, I'm talking to great technologies that span the globe. And so the engineering and the science, it's still around. It's not lost, it's not missing.
It's just, I could listen to you talk about all these things all day, because wow, it's just so many things have happened to you, and you have happened to so many things. That's very impressive. Christian Kodia wants me to tell you that you are a gem. So I'm sure you know.
Then I said thank you.
And Nanaya Edu says that some thoughtfulness here. Much as you can be technical, you must find a way of fusing other aspects to make for a better, complete person. So if you're tuned in, this is still the NSMQ live chat with Edem Dzakpasu. My producers want me to say that Christian said, taste the red paper. I am sure TK said this. So this is an inside joke for those who know where the joke is coming from. But it's been interesting hearing about your MBA and how it has made you a rounded person. I guess we can talk about your career now, your current job. You've been with the organization you're with since, I think, 2013.
That's correct.
So can you tell us about what you do now? After all these things that you've been through, what does Edem do on a regular day nowadays?
Great. So today, as you pointed out, I've been with Chevron Corporation for the past close to 8.5 years. Well, it's actually 8.5, because I started in August of 2013. And I was fortunate to join the company through this MBA development program, where they rotate you through functions within the organization across the entire value chain. So for those that do not know, Chevron is a big oil and gas company that has operations in the upstream side of the business, which relates to exploration and production. It has a midstream, which is storage, transportation, and then the downstream, which is refining, sales, and marketing. So it gave us a broad exposure across the entire value chain, learning about different businesses and how we create value. As I pointed out, all these terms, technologies I didn't know at the time. And so it's good experience and exposure. And then throughout these rotational assignments, I had mentors. I also met colleagues. I met superiors that I lean on for advice to move to the next career trajectory. And so that's pretty much how I navigated my way. And then now currently I'm on the venture capital side, which is where we make investments in startups. So Chevron Technology Ventures has been in existence since 1999. It's one of the oldest, most consistently run corporate venture capital shops in the energy space. And, you know, we have like two active funds. There's a core fund. They look at technologies that enhance our base business. And there's a future fund where I belong, where we look at technologies that enhance, enable the energy transition, right? So we look at the whole landscape. So think about how do we decarbonize our operations? So think of things like carbon capture, hydrogen, mobility platforms, emerging mobility well. So think about electrification, think about energy storage, batteries. We also have distributed power. So think about on the generation side, integration optimization, avoidance. And then, we have a circular carbon economy. So think about waste to product, carbon to product recycling. The fun part about this is that it's externally facing. So I get to talk to a lot of great entrepreneurs that have done amazing things, trying to raise funds to help scale their business to the next phase. And so through those engagements, I also do learn a lot. And there have been instances where I've had to lean on some of the little science that I learned back in Presec, especially when equations come into play, and I have to try and see if I'm familiar with the notations and the characters that they showcase. That is not to suggest in any way that I totally understand what I see, but at least being familiar with the material helps, or it aids comprehension. So it helps that I'm able to lean on some of those to make those decisions. And it's a great collaborative effort. You have strong team members, those that have advanced degrees like PhDs and the like, and our authorities in your field of interest. So you lean on these subject matter experts to help shape your thinking. And then also, as you talk to these startups and you scan the landscape, you also add in value to the corporation, to society at large, right? If you invest in an opportunity that helps save the environment from, say, single-use plastics, etc., not only are you adding value to whatever organization you're dealing with, you're also adding value to society at large, because it's a win-win situation. And then to yourself too, you're building up your own competence and then helping shape your career as you traverse through different trajectories until you get to where you want to get to. So if you ask me in sum, I think it's a rewarding and refreshing experience because I'm able to learn a lot. I have a lot of mentors that would help gauge, shape my thinking and provide a sense of direction. I have peers that would bounce off ideas off me, and I'll do the same thing with them. And then also I have people that also look up to me and bounce off ideas because they believe I also bring something to the table. So more of a symbiotic relationship where you get here, you pull here, the pull there, and then it becomes a whole big part. You're part of the big whole, and your part is very significant to make the whole happen. So in sum, I would say it's been a refreshing and rewarding experience, great experience, exposure, and also, you have the opportunity to, it's a global company, global corporation, you're dealing with global startups. So you can travel around places to see actually where folks are making these great technologies come into fruition. So it's been an exciting journey. It's great. And so far, so good.
It sounds incredible. Jeremy Ako wanted to know what you were doing, and I'm sure his question has been answered now. Christian Kodia wants me to ask you how you rate yourself in terms of academics among your siblings.
That is war. I can't, because my they're different backgrounds. I have, when it comes to my household, you find most professions. I guess I'm the only engineer. There are lawyers. There are 3 lawyers. There's the pharmacist, a teacher. There's a doctor. I don't know how I can make that happen. Maybe I'll say I'll rank 7 out of 7. So I'll be the bottom.
Very modest of you. Drew Nina says, more fire, Edem. This man is a wonderful person inside out. Keep up the good work.
No, Drew. Drew and I were in Brazil together during the World Cup. She Jama.
this Jama has followed you from, I'm sure it was even before Presec, but yes, it's followed you from Presec all the way. That's very nice. So we've done, I think, about an hour worth of conversation. So it's time to wrap up. But before we go, I want to just ask about your passion. I know you're into Formula One.
Yeah.
So I want to hear the story behind how you got into Formula One and how that ties into your daily life.
Yeah, great question. So I was introduced to the sport by one of my seniors. I think I mentioned at the beginning. So I used to have in House 4, there was a cubicle C. So you had Dr. Rikufusu, and then you had Rafael Afaido, MC, who was our trainer during the quiz. And in 2006, he called me once and said, the Formula One race is in the grand finale stage. It's an interesting race. You might want to watch. And the first comment I passed was, why should I spend my time watching cars race on the circuit? Because I don't think that's exciting. So I watched it and I said, well, I didn't quite understand. So I decided to go on BBC, which had a whole Formula One section, pull up more notes. And I thought, okay, so this has some strategy and technology behind it. So that sounds exciting. And then in 2007, Lewis Hamilton burst on the scene. And that's when I went all in, full throttle. And so I've been to different kind of races. I've done Singapore. It was more like the go-to race. I've done Austin, Texas, was right in my backyard before I moved to business school. I've done Abu Dhabi, and then we'll see what other races will be done in the future. But I love it because you have technology and strategy at play. So if you look at Formula One racing, the telemetry data that is garnered by the teams, you have a whole factory working somewhere offshore that's maybe nowhere close to the track where you're racing. And then you have the racing team on the track. And then you have the driver who is on the track. Yet messages are relayed between all these 3 guys to help shape how the race can be won. So thinking about what pit stop to make, what tire strategy to use. So all these things come into play. And you can, clearly, if you watch some of these races, you can tell that it's not just cars moving around, but it's a game of mind games and strategy at play. And that's why I love it. So I've been a fan of Formula One since, you can say 2006. And I've always watched events. And the only one I missed was last season during the finals because of the family situation at the time. So I didn't have the time to watch it. But other than that, it's something that I watch all the time. It's great, it's fun, it's exciting. And then also when I get the opportunity to go to a place like if Ghana qualifies for the World Cup or Ghana is playing a friendly match, and I can get to see it with my colleagues, I will run and go watch the race because then it's always good when you have some Jama time, right? It's always good for Jama season. So that's how I got into Formula One. So thanks to Dr. Eric Ofosu Adomke, he's the one that got me into Formula One. And we still watch it. So we talk about it all the time. We talk almost on a fairly regular basis, talking about races, how the season is playing out, etc. So it's fun.
I think from the conversation we've had, I've heard about all these people you met when you were at Presec, when you were at Tech, all these different Ghanaians, even outside Ghana and like in the US and back home and stuff. So I want to find out about your relationship with Ghana, because in the first edition, we were getting a lot of questions about our brilliant minds migrating to the US and migrating outside the country. And so I would ask my guests, so I'm putting it to you, what do you think about this brain drain, and how do you feel about it?
Great question. So I can speak for myself, and I think it holds for many of my colleagues. So I think the way I see it is what opportunity you get, right? And how you make the best out of. And if you take Presec, for instance, the core of the class, the sharpest minds are all in Ghana. So the godfathers, if you will, the folks that were the men in the class, they are all in Ghana, right? So only a few are outside. But then we still keep in touch. So we trade ideas, we trade notes, share best practices. And so it helps drive this symbiotic relationship of sharing ideas about how well we can help improve things here and there. When you get exposed to advanced economies, one great benefit I would say is the fact that you get access to materials that you ordinarily wouldn't have. I recall when I was a TA at Texas A&M, I could build a circuit from scratch and then have to teach students how to do it, right? So those were things that I didn't have access to at the time when I was back home. So it was good to get exposed to this, and I could then relay that same kind of information to my colleagues on the ground as to how best we can help. And then also, if we have to raise a fund and then get materials and share with our teams back home, we do that. One classic example I would say is that when we met as a team back in 2009, like my colleagues and I, we decided to institute a scholarship award for the NSMQ students from Presec. So the goal was simple: get to the final, there'll be a cash award. And we've maintained that at all times, right? So that's just to maintain the spirit. And then more importantly, we came up with the Presec Leadership Forum. So that was a career guidance and counseling session aimed at talking to students at Presec about what it is that we all did to get to where we were. So more like sharing our experiences, because we felt when we were on campus, we did not get that exposure. We did not get that kind of mentorship. So why shouldn't we do it now? So we reached out to the headmaster, liaised with the board, they set out a date. So the first edition, we held it, I think it was January 2011. So that's about 11 years ago that we held this event. And during the time we're granted audience at Joy FM, Kedisi of Kofi Anza. So then Honorable Kojo Nkrumah was the host of Super Morning Show. And so when we got on the show and we talked about the event and that we're having at Presec, the first comment he passed was that, maybe I should be looking at doing such a thing too at my school, because, usually when we go back, it's all about homecoming, having fun. But I think this is more impactful because you're sharing experiences that will help shape somebody's future, somebody's thinking. So to answer your question, I think it works all the same way. For me in particular and my colleagues, what we've done is setting up such kind of structures where we set up like a career guidance counseling session, a scholarship award scheme that can help us bring or groom the next crop of leaders, right? So that they come in knowing that we did not come through Presec, exit, and then not show any interest, but we are still engrossed in the school itself, and we're making sure that all that we learned and all that Presec gave us to get us to where we are, now it's time to give back. So to answer your question, I think in the case for us, it's more about what impact you make with the opportunities that are presented to you, wherever you find yourself. Because we have great people doing amazing things back home that those of us that are outside would never, ever be able to attain. But it's great to see that because it's homegrown and share those ideas, learn from each other. So talking about Ghana, whenever I'm in Ghana, the contest is on, I'm always there. 2019, I was in the hall at the National Theatre when Ogasco finally avenged their 1996 defeat. But we'll leave to fight them another day. We'll inflict a much deeper wound when that happens.
A serious warning. Okay, thank you so much for being on the show, Edem. Once again, it's been the NSMQ Live Chat. we'll be having live sessions with NSMQ legends, or some people say we shouldn't call everyone a legend, but we'll be having conversations with former contestants of the NSMQ every fortnight on Thursdays at 5 p.m. So you can join us for the next edition. But today we've had the legendary Edem Dzakpasu, who has just wowed me today. I'm babbling, but I'm actually a little short of words. So to wrap up, I'm just going to give Edem the floor. You can give us your final message if you have any Presecans you want to shout out, because you've already done that throughout this conversation. But just any final words to our fans, to your fans, to Presecans and associates and allies and enemies or whatever.
Great. Thanks so much. The shout outs, I have to do the shout outs for sure. So to my teammates, Papa Kofi Anor and Dr. Alex Jan, and then doctors Neboy Hammond and Chris Adai, and then Paco Sinu. So that's the team of 6, class of 96. We also have to give shout out to Rafael Fado, MC Bordeaux, who was Godfather, who was training us together with Frank Kamenya, who was also the coordinator for all the events. And of course, Mr. Pepra was the overseer of the whole program that made all the success during our time happen. And there are lots of names that I would like to shout, but I think for the interest of time, I may not be able to go through. But it's good and it's great that we got this opportunity to represent Presec in the 96th edition, given that we had won in 95. And so we came in very well prepared, knowing that we'll do well. And it turned out we did well also, especially as you pointed out, winning back-to-back. It had never happened. And since they discontinued that edition, we'll hold it for life because we won back-to-back 95, 96. My last words would be for the contestants taking part in the quiz. I would say, whenever you get the opportunity to represent your school, it's an amazing opportunity. Make the best out of it. As you interact with students from other schools, yes, there's always the rivalry about, obviously it's a contest. Somebody has to win, somebody has to lose. But the way I see it is you learn a lot through that. It helps guide you. It helps also shape your thinking. And it also helps you in so many ways that you ordinarily would not have had, especially for me, being able to calculate and work stuff in less than 5 seconds gave me this risk, being able to take risks. It made me comfortable with taking risks, knowing that I might fail in my pursuits, but I can always get back because I have some time to make up, right? Rather than sitting in the back thinking, can I really do this over the whole period of time? And then time is gone. So those are the simple nuggets you get from that. And also, I think it's always great that you have some mentors. I can't emphasize that enough. The reason being, wherever pursuit you want to take, there's somebody who's probably trudged that path before you. And the person is a good resource to give you an advice about the pitfalls that they met and how they were able to surmount, or the ones they couldn't. And so you should be wary of, and that would help guide you. So it could be a senior. It could be, somebody from some other school that you saw or admired and wanted to talk to. So take advantage of that. And then I would say is that anything that comes your way, just make the best out of it. So it goes back to the saying, anything that's worth doing at all is worth doing well. It might not be exciting, it might not be fun, but when you put yourself into it, you can make it exciting, you can make it fun, and the results will speak for itself. Because if you execute on something that you don't show an interest in, the results will reflect that. But if you show an interest, the results will also reflect that too. And you always don't know whom you are impacting, especially when you're at these events. And a quiz competition, somebody is watching you to make a decision about, should I even study science or should I not? And then he sees your exploits and says, you know what? I really like what I saw here. I think I want to study science. And so that is great when you have that opportunity. And the final thing I would say is that always maintain relationships. It's the key to life. The way it works, I've mentioned my Mankwetia days. I gave shout out. Let me give shout out to Arafat. Frimpong and Fredo said, these are my classmates from primary school. So we're talking about 30-something years ago, right? We're still in touch. And then, my UP folks, Omar Gary, we all went back to Presec. And so we became Presec Boys again. Ratu Skobnakwa, we all came from CJSS, went to Presec. So you keep in touch with these groups. The reason is that as you go up in life or as you traverse through different careers, these are the same people you meet again, and they might be your benefactors at some point. So it's always good to keep in touch with them, especially when you're not on the ground and they are on the ground. Because when you're there all the time and they see you and you're in touch with them, they know, oh yeah, he's always part of us. Because I'm always feel like, oh yeah, Edem is always here. And so they think, okay, yeah, he's always around. So they'll be more than willing and happy to lend a hand, right? So it's good to keep those relationships. And then always try to prioritize. There are a lot of things that will come to your mind. Have a game plan. And once you have that game plan, as Mike Tyson said, I'll repeat here, everybody has a plan to get punched in the face. But get punched in the face anyway, because it will then let you rearrange your thoughts, craft a new game plan, and then try to move on to the next, as opposed to not having anything at all. There's a reason companies have business plans, organizations have goals, there are New Year resolutions, etc. At least you have something that you're looking up to. So if that changes, yes, it's fine. It might change, but at least there's a plan you have and you prioritize them. So these are my nuggets I'll give for fans. And to prime time, I'll say keep up the amazing work. I mean, it's been exciting watching and following the science and math quiz throughout the years. I know at some point there was a hiatus because there was a small break. We're all sad when that happened, and we're excited now that it's back full throttle where you can see on all channels being streamed live. The rivalry is great. When we give it to Kwabotre, I'll send my big boy a text and tell them, they finished you, or we finished you. If we give Kumaka, I'll send a text. When to give Gehe, I'll tell them, we dispatched you. So it's great to have the program running again. And then I like the fact that the scope has expanded to get to all these schools that in the past were not part of it. And we've seen Presec has been in the wilderness before because we got knocked out by some schools in the past, and we had to play Justified or Inclusive before we could come back on again. So it's good that we've expanded the scope. It makes science and math exciting. And I think now the event has more of a global scope. A lot of people ask about these events and they wonder, what is this that people talk so much about? But the impact you've had on this event itself, it's beyond measure. So please keep it up. And I'll say to my Presec guys, we're shooting for the number 7, and that's happening 2022 for sure. Because we always want to give our opponents an level lead, overwhelming force. That's the game plan. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Edem, for joining us. And thank you for tuning in to the first episode of the 2022 edition of the NSMQ live chats. My name is Anthony Adiaba. We will have new episodes every fortnight on Thursdays at 5 p.m. See you next time. Have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.